Hello, my friends. This is Lynda Lippin, and welcome to the Pilates Goddess podcast. Well, hello. Happy Thanksgiving, my friends in the U.S. It's Lynda Lippin here, your host for the Pilates Goddess podcast, and welcome back one more time. For those of you out of the U.S., I still think a day of giving thanks and having some gratitude is never a bad idea. So I'll wish you a happy Thanksgiving too. Why not? So in this episode, I am continuing you on your journey into the Pilates mat. We are going to take some of the hardest exercises in the mat and look at them. We're looking at Jackknife through swimming. All right, so we just got done doing all of this kind of supine hyperextension, right? And rotations. And then we come down from the spine twist and into the jackknife. Now, the jackknife exercise is not a great exercise for anyone who's flexion intolerant. It is not good for folks with low bone density. This is a healthy spine person exercise. Also, high blood pressure, glaucoma, shoulder girdle issues can all have some issues with the jackknife. And essentially, what the jackknife is your legs are together on the mat. I'll give you the full version at first. If you're on a full studio mat, you can have your arms up on the dowels at the top edge of the mat, right? And the arms relatively extended. If you don't have a studio mat, your arms are down by your sides. Your legs come up to 90 degrees. You roll back, legs back overhead, kind of like you did earlier for the rollover, right? But then you pike your legs up towards the ceiling, trying to extend your whole body as much as you can. And then you come back into the hip flexion and roll down. As the exercises advance, you can keep your hips a little more extended and the legs kind of flagged on the way down. This is actually an intermediate exercise, not an advanced exercise, in the way that the roll over is a little actually more advanced than the jackknife. If you're a teacher, I would recommend introducing jackknife before introducing rollover, because jackknife works a similar heels together, toes apart lifting position that's very similar to the short spine, that's similar to the long spine, that's similar to breathing with the bar on the Cadillac, that's similar to the leg springs, that's similar to a lot of other exercises that we are doing around the studio. So when you're looking at that work in jackknife, I think you can also see some elements of the bicycle and the shoulder bridge with kicks, right? You can see some elements of all of these exercises. The jackknife does show up in other places. It shows up on the high barrel, interestingly enough, with the hands back on the ladder and the chest up toward the ceiling. You can also do, smaller versions of it on the small barrel and on the spine corrector. But it's a hard exercise. But for, again, folks with healthy spines and good bone density, the jackknife is an excellent strength builder in a very, very real way, and will then help prepare those clients or prepare you for some, again, of the more challenging work that's about to come. Your jackknife is going to help prepare you for your teaser and your hip circles that we're going to talk about today. That jackknife is also going to help you prepare for things like boomerang and crab and, other situations coming up for you on the mat. And once we come out of jackknife, we roll onto our sides and we go into the side kick series. Now, At the beginning, the side kick series, you're going to do it with your back, like you're on your side, right? But you line your torso up with the back edge of your mat, and then you bring your feet forward to the front edge of your mat. If you're on a studio mat, you can even bring your feet forward to the moon box, should you need. Now, because I've got neck issues personally, I rarely teach the side kick series with the hand under the head, kind of up on your elbow. I teach it with head resting on arm or on a yoga block, a pillow, a foam roller is usually a good height, whatever you got. In the studio, for folks who aren't comfortable laying with their head on their arm, you can also always place a small pillow or rolled up towel between the ear and the arm, which can sometimes just give enough space for the joint to feel a little bit better. And the top hand goes just in front of your rib cage for stability. And there are varying versions of the side kicks. I think, as we know, there's a lot of them. There's the front back kick. There's the bicycle that comes from that, right? Then you've got your kicks up to the ceiling and squeezing down. You've got your side développés going up, going down. You've got your inner thigh lifts. You can do double leg lower lifts. You can do small circles. You could do big circles. You can hot potato. You can have a grand old time. But again, what's the object of the side kick series? It's very much strengthening for the side of the body. So the side of the body that's down on the mat, you're pulling your waist up a little bit from the bottom of the mat. That's going to help stabilize the hips and keep the pelvis, in pretty much in one position. You're always going to get a little bit of pelvic movement as you're moving your legs. It's how things work in the body. And then you're looking at really reaching the leg that's moving kind of away from your hip, away from your rib, away from your shoulder, and getting, as free movement as you can at that ball joint of the hip socket. And then in the classical world, we flip onto our stomachs in between, and we do something called either grasshopper or just like kicks, where you are on your stomach, your head is down, and you lift up both legs and you click your heels, and you can add knee bends to that, bending and straightening out if you wish. We do it about 20 times, and then we go to the other side. And you do the same thing on the other side. Now, the side kick series is awesome. It works a lot on the stability and mobility we need for proper gait. You can actually add the upper body in. I like to do an oppositional arm actually on the simple front back kicks, whereas my leg reaches back, my top arm reaches forward in front of me, and then it reaches behind me as my leg kicks forward. I kind of like that gait work, and I like that diagonal work. So, you can kind of play with this, but just understand what you're doing here. You can modify the side kick. You can bend the bottom knee if you need to, although I find for most clients, if they have their feet forward, they're fine. Know that there is none of that generally, that kind of bent knee, that kind of piriformis and rotator work. That's not really a thing in Pilates. The side kick series is done with legs straight, unless you're, bicycling or doing something like that. So, any other stuff that you're adding in there, just know that that's not really Pilates, and that's okay, but it just isn't. The side kick series we once again see all over the studio. You are going to see it in even the kind of side lying work and the star and things like that on the reformer. You're going to see this side kick. And by the way, the side kicks on the reformer are not a classical exercise, so I'm not even going to talk about that. Because if you're in a full studio, or even if you're not, if you're in a club Pilates and you got a spring wall, you can do side lying leg springs using the spring wall. Okay, there's no need to do it on the reformer. But that's my opinion. That's it. You see these on the Cadillac using side leg springs. Okay, You can see this standing in a number of places. You can also see elements of the series and all of the standing work on the Wanda chair and the high chair. You know, this work of strengthening the outer hip, the inner thigh, and the whole body in different planes of motion is really, really important. And that's what the side kicks do for us. And then we move from this kind of closing and opening just on one side to the closing and opening on both sides with teaser. Now, the quote unquote simplest, most basic form of teaser is where you're on your back. And once again, teaser is not for the flexion intolerance. There are variations you can do. We'll talk about that in a second. Side kick is really good for everybody. And if your client is having trouble laying on their hip because it hurts or is a little bit sensitive, put an extra pad under them, have them get a thicker mat. They could double their mat under them. Like, that's the answer. Some people are just more sensitive than others. So teaser one is you're on your back, your knees are bent, your feet are on the mat. You straighten one leg, you keep your thighs attached. You send your arms back overhead and you roll up just towards that straight leg. And you come back down and then you switch legs. That's the most basic, okay? So we start there. Second most basic is now both legs are straight and they're maybe, 40, somewhere between 90 and 45 degrees away from your body. Here you also have elements, right, of that jackknife and that sitting position for spine twist. And then you're rolling up that upper body towards both legs and rolling it down. And then that progresses to the whole body supine down on the mat, rolling the upper body and the legs up together and rolling back down. When you're up there, you can play with circling your arms in the other direction. You can play with lowering and lifting your legs. You can play with doing oppositional arm and leg circles. If you are flexion intolerant or working with clients who are flexion intolerant, start them seated. Heels are together, hinging back away from their legs, and then seeing if they can tuck the pelvis under enough to lift the legs. Again, this can be done with a bent knee as well. Teaser shows up everywhere, my friends. I mean, a lot of the rolling exercises have elements of teaser. Teaser shows up on every single piece of equipment. Every single one. There's nothing in the Pilates studio other than maybe the pedipole and maybe the baby armchair and, the little things like the foot corrector that you're not doing teaser on. But there's teaser on the mat. There's teaser on the Cadillac. You could do it spring above with the push-through bar, spring below with the tower bar. You can also do teaser using the arm springs behind you or in front of you, leg springs behind you or in front of you. Teaser on the reformer, which is on the long box with the handles, right? Teaser on the Wanda chair, not so much on the high chair because there's other work that we're doing there. And there's, of course, the back of the chair, which prohibits the teaser. You can do teaser on all of the barrels. And then we move into hip circles. Now, hip circles takes the shape of teaser and then adds the pelvic movement of corkscrew. So we got a lot going on, a lot. Once again, if you're in a studio and you're on a Pilates studio mat, you can bring your hands behind you on the wooden dowels. Ideally, palms are back. Opening the chest. Now, you're going to want to externally rotate your arms for stability, but if you can find stability with the palms back, I highly suggest you try it. It's something that works well for me. But palms forward works as well. And if you're just on a floor mat, you can, play with the positioning of your arms, knowing that fingertips forward is ideal, but if you need to do side or back and get a little more external rotation for the stability, go for it. This starts with a can-can, what we call it can-can. You bring both knees into your chest. You bring both your knees right and then left and then right and kick them up, and then left and then right and then left and kick them up. So it is like a little can-can. And then we move from that into a big circle with the lower body alternating the circles. Heels are together, legs are straight, and the legs go to the right hip, down to the left hip, and back up to the ceiling while we keep the arms straight and the chest lifted, and then you go the other way. This is a bear, my friends. This exercise is a beast. You can, when you first try it, try coming down on your elbows and forearms behind you. Give yourself a lower platform, right? Curl the pelvis under a little bit more. Keep your chest lifted. And then start to move towards a straighter and straighter arm and a straighter and straighter leg. This is literally one of those exercises where you are just looking to hold yourself together in these hip circles, okay? Where else do the hip circles show up? Well, you know, that while they may not show up in obvious ways, the hip circles, I want you to think about different exercises that we do, say, on the reformer or the chair, like tendon stretch, right? Where your toes are on the edge of the reformer, your hands are on the bar, you're pushing back and dropping your hips down and pushing the carriage forward, okay? This is relevantly similar. I also want you to think about the twist on the reformer, the snake on the reformer. Again, a little more upper body intensive, but working on that twisting of the pelvis along with the opening of the chest. All right. Also think about some of the exercises where we may not be turning the pelvis while we're lifting, but think about the high frog on the chair, all right? Think about exercises like that, where we're lifting up the hips, where we're holding the upper body steady, where we're doing that work through our arms for that pushing up. Okay, so hip circles is an important one, because ultimately when we are able to do the hip circles with our ass on the ground, we are then more cognizant of where our pelvises are when our butts are up in the air or over to the side or somewhere not on the ground. And then we finish out this little adventure with swimming. So from the hip circles, we've been really tight. We've been a little closed here in this series, you know? We've done the jackknife, which is closed to open. We've done the side kick, again, closed to open. We've done the teaser, closing up into that flexion from both ends and opening. We've done the hip circles where we're working in that flexion so much, but trying to keep the chest open and steady. And then we get to come onto our stomachs. We get to reach our arms and legs nice and long, get very heavy in our hip bones and our pelvises, and start to swim. Swimming is an oppositional movement. I encourage you at the beginning of swimming to go very wide with your arms and your legs towards the corners of the mat, like you're, you know, a decent size X. And then you're going to lift up the opposite arm and leg and switch and just keep alternating that. And when that feels good, you're going to lift up your head a little bit and you're just going to go faster, maybe not touching down your hand or your foot as you're doing this work. This is not an exercise that's necessarily about height. It's about length. It's about breathing. And again, it's about that diagonal oppositional movement. Swimming is really good for everybody. I have a client who I've been working with online for years, who's been doing Pilates for over 20 years, and she never did swimming with me up until this last year. She always rested her head on her hands and just did the swimming kicks. But when I finally got her to realize that she could open up and separate her hands from her ears and get a little space there, she really started to move her arms more and now is getting more upper body strength from that and stability from that, especially in her upper shoulder girdle, which is really important. So don't shirk the swimming. I've had clients who hated swimming, and I don't understand it. I don't. Think about a nice, long, languid, lovely swim in nice, warmer water where you can really reach your limbs away from each other and go from there into a faster, tighter position if you want. Okay? Now, swimming shows up in obvious places all over the studio. Swimming actually shows up on its own on the long box on the reformer. But versions of the stability that we get in swimming become very important in things like breaststroke on the reformer, yeah, and things like push through on the stomach, on the Cadillac, and things like the single arm push up on the Wunda chair, in things like the front and side lunges on the Wunda chair and the high chair. Okay, so you're going to see this. You also see versions of swimming with slightly less things underneath you on the barrels. So there's lots of places to play with this movement in other ways. You can also, for your clients who may not be comfortable being right on their stomachs, you can bring them up on all fours and have them just reach opposite arm and leg and alternate that, which is another, good option for folks who are not comfortable on their stomachs, but can be on all fours. So, my friends, I'm going to Thanksgiving to you. Thank you so much for showing up for me, for showing up for the podcast, for showing up for Pilates Teacher Mastermind and Strong Bones Pilates. I get to this time of year and I am so overwhelmed with gratitude. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And as always, if you love the podcast, please leave a rating and if you can, a written review. And I will be back to you on Tuesday where we will be looking at leg pull front through boomerang. All right, my friends, have a great, hopefully restful and fun time if you're in the U.S. and this is a holiday weekend. And everybody else just have a great weekend. And I will see you next week. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to the Pilates Goddess podcast. Music brought to you by Nerd Salad. Please leave a review on Apple Podcasts, especially if you liked it. And please like, share, and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks.